So I'm going to be taking a different tack, really, from our speakers to date, in that I'm going to be talking about qualitative market research projects as we currently know them, so in-person qualitative research, online qualitative research, the kind of things that we've all been doing for several years. Talking about it from a qualitative researcher's perspective, a practitioner's perspective, but because qualitative research actually is all about language, and I have been interested in language for a long time, I'm going to be focusing on the language aspect. And for odd reasons, I suppose, I've also been interested in language and AI since I was a teenager, not as not from a technical point of view, but just because it's interesting to see what was going to happen. So that's the kind of thing I'm going to be talking about. So it's about how AI might affect qualitative research projects, for better or worse. I'll start with talking about speech to text, which is the easy one, then move on to text analytics, which is possibly slightly more contentious, and the big issue, knowledge work or automation, which is really about, will we still have a job, and if so, what's that going to be like? So those are my three topics. I was listening to Google Play, and I'd put it on Google Play Radio, so it was just playing me what it thought I wanted. And along came Elmo with New York Morning, and I thought this is the perfect summary for this talk, which is somewhere in all that talk is all the answers, because what qualitative research is becoming is all that talk. So first of all, I'm going to be talking about voice-controlled computing, or the impact of speech to text. Voice-controlled computing via bots, whatever type of bots they are, is developing very, very fast. And there's lots of examples. I've just used OK Google as one. But a couple of months ago, Google said that about 20% of searches were now by voice. So we speak voice and it converts it to text. That's why it's speech to text. And their thought certainly is that that's going to grow and grow and grow and grow. And my personal feeling is that in a few years' time, we'll look back at people pressing their fingers onto letters, onto small mobile phones, and think, wow, how outdated is that? We won't really be doing that anymore, or to a much reduced extent. So speech to text, we think, is going to increase. So my thought then was, well, what does that mean for qualitative research? And I think it's going to mean that we get more text, and we're going to get it faster. So from one point of view, that's possibly a bad idea. So I'll start with talking about online. Now, we already get a lot of text when we do online bulletin board discussions. People talk about how difficult it is to analyse online qualitative and how do you sift through all the stuff, all the talk. And it's likely that we'll get more if we can speak it, because people say more than when they write. So if they're responding to an online qual session, it's online, but they're talking, they're likely to say more than when they wrote it. So we'll get more. I think as far as in-person qualitative research is concerned, though, so a focus group or depth interview or whatever it will be, the impact will simply be that we get a faster turnaround, because we can get a transcript so much quicker. So I'm imagining a situation, and this is blue sky, I'm pretty sure, that each person in a focus group has got some kind of variable, and what they're saying goes automatically to speech to text, so it's recorded, and then something merges them all, so you get your transcript, and that goes then to your client who's on some other continent, and it's all therefore much faster, and therefore it's also more agile. I don't really mean that in the IT way, I just mean that it's more flexible, things can be done quicker, things can be changed along the way. So in a sense, we've got a problem, and we've also got an opportunity, I think, with speech to text. I did a little diagram. How do you like that? How much the amount of text we're going to analyse when we get voice control computing. So the question then becomes, if we've got too much text, then we've already talked about text analytics. Perhaps text analytics can help. You would think it would be ideally placed to help, and part of what I'm saying is, yes, machine-based machine learning based, so in other words AI based, text analytics can help us find the answers in all that talk. But, and this is a big point of what I'm trying to say here, it needs qual researchers to develop our own products and practices about this and not borrow from big data. So just to be really, really, really clear, the text analytics stuff that's done on big data, so those massive surveys on social media is, and I'm thinking about IBM Watson, I'm thinking about Earned in Text, I'm thinking about whatever's out there. It's incredibly clever, very sophisticated, but actually completely wrong for qualitative research projects of the kind that we do now. And I think we'll continue to do those kinds of projects because clients will still have questions that they want to ask. And I'll just spend a couple of minutes now talking about why that form of text analytics is inappropriate for qualitative research. This distinction is a really important one for carrying this conversation forward about text analytics in qual. On the one hand, we've got big data, survey open ends, as I've just mentioned. I'm calling that qualitative information just because. And I've got a little picture there that describes what that kind of qualitative information is often like. Qualitative research, on the other hand, are more like focus groups, IDIs, any kind of online qual. That I'm calling qualitative research. It's different and it has a different image because it has a very different nature. And so let me follow through with that distinction for a minute. So as I said, I'll focus on language. What qualitative information, so big data, survey open ends, those kinds of things, uses a particular style of language. It's formal, hence the picture. It's often very structured, or it's incredibly short, like tweets are short. And this is just a quote from some survey that we did, and as you can see, it's perfectly syntactically correct. Service providers were completely professional. They rang regularly to see how my treatment was progressing. It's a very easy sentence for people to process, and it's a very easy sentence really for a machine to process as well, or one that's been appropriately taught. The problem, though, is that qualitative research, as in focus groups, IDIs, etc., the language is very, very different. It's conversational because you're having a conversation with people. It's often informal. Sometimes people speak in shorthand, and sometimes they speak in a very complex way. So here I've got some examples. The shorthand one. My primary role at Christmas is the walking ATM. Everyone in the online bulletin board knew what that man meant. This was from a face-to-face focus group. This is obviously very complex. Sunglasses, I must admit, I don't put them on until I start squinting and, oh, I can't really see properly. Maybe I should put my sunglasses on now. And it's not like an automatic thing that I will put them on. That's a very common way for people to speak. It's a very common way for people to speak in focus groups, but it's very, very difficult for a machine to compute all that. So, and one of the reasons for that is because in focus groups online, doesn't really matter, people speak in their own individual idiolect, in their own idiosyncratic way, and what big data text analytics needs more than anything else really is scale. So you need scale in order to find patterns. Qualitative research is small anyway, and if you're relying on different ways of people expressing things, you're making it really, really small. So that's one of the reasons why conventional text analytics that's used in big data won't really work for qualitative research. So we've got a lot of talk. It's not, that kind of thing's not really going to help us get much further with it. And there is another issue, that those kind of sophisticated natural language processing NLP models, like IBM Watson, I think is a fair example, Earned in Text probably, that are used for qualitative information, they have a specific purpose. What they want to do is take qualitative information, survey open ends, social media, turn it into structured data so that it can be analysed quantitatively. Now, I don't have a problem at all with that, with any, for example, any of the work we've already heard about this afternoon, Sydney time, but it's not what we want from qualitative research, is it? So here's an example. This is what I did was I had an online bulletin board discussion about Christmas. It was 15 men all talking about Christmas for several days. And so I put it into various forms of text analytics to see what would happen. And this one, don't worry that you can't really read it properly, but is one of the outputs that you get from doing that. So it gave me the relevance of, actually this wasn't the Christmas one, this was a different one now I think about it, but it doesn't really matter. The output was some kind of decimal, and I think you probably agree with me that numbers and stats have no role to play in qualitative research. The danger is it did it. So the sample here was pretty small, but it still managed to come up with a figure. But any kind of figure like that is not what we want as an output from a qualitative research project. We're looking for some form of insight. Now you might say, well, word clouds could do it, and here's this. It's actually the same data. It wasn't the Christmas one. It was an insurance one, and it looks as if it might suit qualitative research because it's all colourful and pretty. So maybe that's the answer, and I've heard many people say that this is qualitative output. Well, it's not, because it's actually based on numbers, and you get a big word if you've got a lot of numbers behind it. But it's also wrong in many ways, and I'm going to use the Christmas example to explain why it's wrong. So this is when I put the Christmas online bulletin board data into some software and create a word cloud, and it looks easy to understand. It looks as if it's about Christmas, which it was. It looks as if it was about time, family time, some day of the year, one day of the year. Maybe you could look at it like that, but it's actually completely inaccurate in terms of what was actually said. Now, I will say at this point that this wasn't very sophisticated software that I used to create the word cloud. I'm really just using this example to illustrate a point. The reason it's inaccurate is that word time. If you look at the boxes on the left there, it says the time seed. It looked like it was a single construct, but it wasn't. It just came from these things: the first time, at the same time, exact time of year, the peak of Christmas delivery times, last time for peeps, and an honest attempt for everyone to truly spend the time together. The word time there was used in a completely different way. It had a different role to play in the sentence and didn't mean what it looked like it meant from the word cloud. And it also missed moments because it wasn't time. Word clouds count words, and moments is a different word from time. And so this one is a lovely quote about Christmas being a double-ended sword, but it didn't capture it in the word cloud. So therefore, my argument is that we don't want stats and we don't want word clouds based on word counts if we're looking at qualitative research projects, because qualitative research is A, idiosyncratic in the way it's expressed, and B, too small in scale for there to be any pattern for the software, the AI software to find. So AI software generally needs, is software the right word? Don't know. Needs scale. So, one solution is on its way, the beautifully named Parsey McParseface. You cannot believe how excited I was when I saw this. It was launched by Google back in May, I think. It's not its real name. I think it's called something much more boring, but they called it Parsey McParseface. And what it does is parse. So what it does is identify that the word time in the example I just gave you was doing a different thing in each of those sentences. So Parsey McParseface can work that out. I think some of the more sophisticated NLP models, you can teach a machine to recognize these different phrases, but Parsey McParseface wouldn't need to be taught all the different phrases. It would just be able to parse it. So as it says here, it's built on powerful machine learning algorithms that learn to analyze the linguistic structure of language. What Google has done is to launch this as open source, and they are releasing it really to app developers to see what they'll do with it. So it's just really interesting to see what they'll do with it. It could be the solution to our problems, because from a qualitative perspective, we're going to need to parse before we do anything else. Except there is, of course, one other way to do it, which is Leximancer, and I know Sue York works with Leximancer and talks about it elsewhere, and I use it occasionally when this project is suitable. So rather than count words, I quote from their website, it automatically analyzes text documents to identify the high-level concepts in the text. So it tracks concepts as it goes through. And there is as we'll see here, I think it's going to show up. Yes, there is the concept time came up in the Leximancer concept map as well, Christmas. But what's different about this is that it didn't just look at the word time. Sometimes it did and it kept them, and sometimes it didn't keep them as time, it ignored them as something else. But also, because Leximancer already knew that day was time and hour was time and year was time, it didn't need to be told that, it automatically associated with time. And so all of those identified time concepts on that map are to do with actual time, not word time. And then you click onto that and it will tell you what they are. So that is, I think Leximancer still needs scale. It still needs a decent number of groups or interviews to do. I don't know what that is, mind you. But I want to make a different point about it. I think it's great, very useful, but I need to make a different point because it changes how we analyse. It certainly changes how I analyse qualitative research, because what it does first is it creates the overview. To create that map that I just showed you took about 5 minutes. I got all my transcripts, I loaded them into Leximancer, clicked 5 buttons, and what do you know, Bob's your uncle, there was my map. So yeah, that's all it took. It's incredibly clever, as they all are, but it gives us an overview, and it's hard from a qualitative researcher's perspective to know, well, where do I go from here? So what we have to do is actually read it, which might seem like bad news to some people, but you actually have to. So what I did with that was picked up all the concepts about Christmas, dumped those into an Excel file, read all those, took the time ones, read those, etc. So it gave me a structured way of reading the transcripts, but it didn't mean I didn't read them. Then we have to apply it. We have to have some kind of model or framework, whatever it might be that you use, and then we find the insight, which is in all that talk. So it's a different way of thinking from the way normally I think quantitative researchers, we start with small and end up big. This goes the other way around. It takes a while to learn how to do it. So I'm saying that AI and qual research won't replace reading or listening. What it does is provide an almost instant impartial overview. It is impartial, that guides your investigation and a searchable resource for finding quotes and examples. So that's what it does. It doesn't necessarily do what perhaps you want it to do. And I have a few minutes left, so I'm going to just quickly talk about the knowledge worker automation issue, which is will we still have a job? I think we will. McKinsey's, if we quote from there, suggests that we won't, but I'll move on from them. I think some of us will. So in my humble opinion, online moderating might be at risk because partly it's already automated. In some cases, it's just data collection. There are moderators, and obviously that's what we do here, is very actively engage people as people when we moderate, but there are others who basically just load a whole heap of questions into online software and leave the building. If you've done that, you might as well get a bot to do that. I've written a blog on this elsewhere as to what people will do once they figure out that it's a bot who's actually engaging with them, how they might engage back or not. But I think that in-person moderating won't be at risk because there's still a very clear role to play for the moderator. But it can actually help us a lot. And here I'm going blue sky again, because these are some ways I really think it would be great. So let's just do this. Wearables during in-person research. So imagine a human moderates a face-to-face group discussion while the AI bot measures the non-verbal stuff. It's really, really hard to capture all the non-verbal stuff as you're moderating in a focus group. You try to, but you don't do it. Well, the bot could do it, couldn't they? An AI bot could tailor concepts to each participant's learning style. This is something we conveniently ignore. We just give people a picture to look at and some words, ignoring the fact that we all have different learning styles. Well, they could tailor it, couldn't they? Somehow. I think they can. Also, what about the moderator? Are we using our bot assistant having an instantly accessible library of previous ads, products worldwide? We automatically go because you get briefed on some of them and you forget them and you don't think to suggest them at the right time during the group, but somehow or other they could be brought into the discussion. Magic, I reckon. And similarly, an instantly accessible library of human behavior theories, whether it's behavioral economics or social cognition or social psychology, you might think, oh, right, what's happening here, I can see is the fundamental attribution error because the bot's just remembered it for me. So, yes, of course, it's blue sky stuff, but this is how I think in-person research. These are some of the problems with in-person research, and AI exists to help us solve problems that humans have, and these are the problems that humans have when we moderate. And there's another one. I just found this randomly on the internet, and I thought, oh, it's so nice, I'll just show it. Smile Catcher. It's a gamification of smiles to encourage social interaction. And encourage lowering stress, increase happiness by gamifying smiles. Not really sure how it works, but it is AI, it is the bot, and I think it could help. There we go. Thank you.